Good morning. Welcome to the tutorial on large-scale visual place recognition and image-based localization. This will be given by Alex Candle, Georgios Tolias, Akihiko Torii, and me. We're roughly going to cover two things. The first one is visual place recognition, where we're given a query image and a database of geotagged images. And given the query, we would like to figure out which place is depicted in this query. We'll retrieve the most similar image from the database and then use this to get information about the place and a rough approximation of the camera pose. And this part will be given by Akihito and Georgios, where Aki will cover the classical feature-based methods and Georgios will cover learning-based methods. And then the second part is about precisely estimating the camera pose given the query image, for example, relative to a 3D point cloud. And this part will be given by me, where I'll cover standard feature-based approaches, and Alex, who will do learning-based methods. Schedule is we are going to start with feature-based methods for place recognition, then do learning-based approaches for this, do a short coffee break, and then start with visual localization for accurate pose estimation. As said, there are essentially two parts. The first one, we're more interested in what the query depicts and only roughly in the pose or the position and orientation from which the query was taken. So this part is typically solved as an image retrieval problem. And then in the second part, we would like to precisely locate the position and orientation of that query. So for example, in the context of AR/VR. Why should you care about it? Well, I guess you're all here, so you do care about it anyways. There are a couple of cool applications for this. So one is tagging or geotagging holiday photos, where, for example, you can upload this very nice application from Noah Snavely, where you can upload pictures and then get a very precise geotag. The second is visual information retrieval, where rather than searching for a term, you have a picture, you search with this picture and that get information. For example, here, the closest street view image in Tokyo. But it could be more than just a position. And I believe that an important part of visual place recognition, visual localization, is not necessarily placing a camera accurately, but more getting information about the surroundings. So what are you seeing? So this is, for example, this is an example where you could take a picture, send it to an information retrieval system, and that get fine-grained information about what's seen in this image. So on the left, you see the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and on the right, mural that I can't place at the moment. You could also look at use place recognition techniques to locate images over time and track the development of a place over time. Self-driving cars are another application for image-based localization, where you precisely would like to locate the car. So this is a project we did at DTH a couple of years ago, where we were aiming to build a self-driving car, but not solve the full problem, but more a car that you could leave in front of the parking space, automatically get a parking spot, drive there, park, and come back once you needed it. And in order to navigate through this indoor parking space, you need a precise position and orientation information, and you can't rely on sensors such as GPS because they're just not available. Augmented reality is another application for image-based localization, where you would like to figure out where the camera is with respect to some representation of the scene. And if you know that precisely enough, you can project virtual objects into the scene. And if the pose estimate is stable over time, it is as if they were part of the real scenes. So this is something that we did a couple of years ago. We were by then able to manage to run this in close to real time on an iPad 2. We couldn't do this on iPad 2 footage back then because the rolling shutter of the camera was too severe and we didn't want to spend some time on this. By now we have a more advanced version of this running on a Google Tango tablet. And here's another application for augmented reality where you could use it for navigation in indoor scenes. Here, for example, this is someone being led to a chocolate shop in the main station in Zurich. And well, it's Zurich, so it will lead you to a chocolate shop, but essentially you could also go to other places. And the last example, or application example that I want to show is virtual reality. So this is a master thesis that a student did with me, where he first scanned a room to create this virtual model on the right that kind of reflects the properties of the room. And then this virtual model is geo-registered. So by tracking the position and orientation of the headset with respect to this room, you can track the movement of the user in this virtual world, meaning that you can start walking through this. And so far, this is just a proof of concept showing that you can do this. Ideally, you would like to have the possibility to interact with the scene, but we are not there yet. So the current interaction mechanism that we have is sitting down on chairs, which is a bit strange if you can't see your own hands. But this is one application example. In general, before Aki starts, the slides will be available on the tutorial website, and the tutorial should also be available as a video later on the CVPR website. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the tutorial.
Okay. Hello. Yes. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for coming this tutorial. Okay. Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. In this first session of tutorial, I'm gonna talk about feature-based place recognition. My session will be more to the beginners or who don't know about instance level recognition, image retrieval, place recognition. So I'm afraid this session might be a bit bored for the experts, but I hope my session will be take a role as a guide for advanced deep feature-based methods or 3D-based method. So I hope there are still nice things for the feature-based image, feature-based classic feature-based approaches, as we can discuss about it later or probably in the panel. So this is the table of contents of this talk. I will first talk about the goal of visual place recognition in the introduction and discuss about what the challenges are. Next, we review the local feature-based image representation, which is commonly used in the place recognition program. We then introduce how we customize or optimize the standard image retrieval method to the place recognition programs. Then I will finally introduce the common data set, which is available publicly, and some use which should be useful when you want to evaluate your method in the place recognition framework. So let's get started. So now we would like to consider the task of visual place recognition, where the goal is to recognize the place where a given image is taken. We would like to input an image into the search box and get its location as the output. So to address the place recognition task, the common approach is to cast as visual instance recognition. So in a bit more detail, the standard approach is summarized like this. First, the world is represented as a set of geotagged images. Of course, this should be done offline. Then, given a query image as input, we seek for the best matching image in the database. Again, finally, we transfer the geotag of the best match. This is an example tag. Actually, this tag address is the address of the Google Street View, which has some GPS information, and actually, it also has the orientation. So now I want to discuss why is this interesting. Photos, images, videos are everywhere nowadays. I cannot really organize my thousands of photos of my kids. But actually, for the personal photos, it should be okay to organize by time because you can look back into by time. But if you want to archive any historical photos and want to archive it for the next generations, I think it will be meaningful to organize on the map, on the globe. So I think visual place recognition can do that job, and we can localize, we can essentially localize the photos taken at all time, or even the scans of the photos. So also another interesting point is that we need to study both recognition and geometry, which are very interesting to me, because in other words, standard image retrieval often focus on the image appearance only. But to work on this place recognition, we have to deal with 3D geometry and also the distribution of the images on the globe. So I think this is a bit different, and I like this topic. So maybe I will skip this. So before going to discuss about the challenges in the place recognition, I just want to quickly mention about the synonyms. Some papers call this problem, like us, as place recognition, but some calls location recognition, landmark identification, or geolocalization. I think there are some small differences, like the expected final accuracy of the localization or recognition. But I think essentially we are all tackling to the same problem. So let's next have a look at why the large-scale visual place recognition is challenging. Before thinking about that, let's have a look at the source of geotagged images. There are two major sources. One is the photo community sites like Flickr and Instagram and so on. The good point of these community photos is that it is never stop growing. So people keep uploading the photos. So that means there are many photos taken at different times and different viewpoints. But the images and their geotags are often noisy or contaminated. So we have to do some pre-screening if we want to use those images as a database. The other main source is Street View images, like Google Street View. Such images are accurate and cover almost all the street. but it is updated less frequently. Of course, we have to drive every street. So both can be the sources of the place recognition works. But here we want to do street level recognition. So we should use, if we want to do the street level place recognition, we should use the street view images, of course. Okay. I also have to mention that.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, sure, sure.
So I'm not sure actually if Google Street View imagery is publicly available. So is this the case or no?
So available?
Is this Google Street View imagery publicly available for research, or I'm not sure if it's the case.
Okay. So from my asking to the Google, or our group asked to the Google, so the current understanding is it's fine to use for the research purpose. So we can somehow scrape the images from the Google Street View website, and we are using it. But of course, maybe it's not good for the commercial services. So I wanted to mention that most of the cases, the query images are perspective. So it is natural to prepare the database images as a perspective images. But the Google Street View images has this equirectangular panorama. So we usually prepare the perspective cutouts like this. So now let's have a look at how many images are needed to cover a certain area. The largest dataset used for Street View place recognition is the San Francisco dataset, which covers 6 square kilometers and consists of 1 million images. The 1 million images are not too large for the recent image retrieval techniques. But acquiring and capturing those data are quite difficult. So maybe in near future, if autonomous driving develops and if we can collect those information to the database, the images, database images will be spatially and temporally denser. However, in the current technologies, it is impossible to monitor all the streets every time. So that makes the gaps between the query and the database images. So the gap means database images are taken temporarily sparsely, but query could be taken at any time. Even for short time changes, there will be large illumination changes between day and night or weather condition. For long time, there will be seasonal changes such as tree coloring, snowing, and also structural changes. So as we cannot capture the database images from all the possible viewpoints, there will be always viewpoint changes against the database images. In reality, we have the mixtures of these changes. There will be a large gap in appearance between query and database images like these. In addition, if we want to do the large-scale visual face recognition, it makes the problem even more challenging because we have to deal with the problems of repetition or memory requirement and so on. But thanks to the advances of image retrieval techniques, we can do the place recognition at some level, even now. So there were no technical details, but if there is any question so far, okay. So now I'm going to review the local feature-based image representation, which are commonly used in the place recognition. in the visual instance recognition, given a database of images, we design an image representation extractor function which can provide a mapping from an image to image representation space. Then all the database images representations are extracted offline. When the new image is given, we extract its representation and find the closest database representation and transfer its location. Okay, so the state-of-the-art local feature-based approach is start by extracting local features like SIF. These are then aggregated using bag of words, blurred, feature vectors to obtain the final image representation. There are many improvements to this basic pipeline, such as spatial verification and query expansion. So first, we give a short review of this bag of words representation. This is one of the most well-known approach. So bag of words starts by quantizing the descriptor space using k-means. Descriptor X is extracted and assigned to its closest cluster, denoted with the assignment variable AK here, which is 1 or 0, depending on whether the cluster K is the closest cluster to the descriptor X. Then all the descriptors in the image are assigned to their closest clusters. The assignment variables are summed up, which basically counts the number of descriptors assigned to each cluster. The counts are then concatenated to form bag of words histogram. So this is the basic idea. So next, a more recent aggregation method is blurred, where a descriptor is assigned to its closest cluster, as same as bag of words, but extra information is kept in the form of the residual in this way. In other words, the distance between the descriptor X and the cluster center CK is stored. So to compute a blurred image representation, all the descriptors are extracted and assigned to their closest clusters. Their residuals are summed up and concatenated to form the final blurred vector. The motivation behind the blurred is that it stores more information than bag of words because it saves the location of the descriptors in the descriptor space than just simply counting the number of words. So in the terminology of the CNN, this blurred or bag of words can be seen as a powerful pooling method. So here is the comparison between bag of words and blurred. For bag of words, it is good to use large vocabulary because it makes the histogram sparser. And then you can efficiently implement with the inverted indexing. Another good point is that bag of words matching is essentially the feature matching with quantization. So it can naturally provide a feature-to-feature matches. That means, so let's say left is a query image, right is a database image. So if the features match in the same visual world, we can just connect it and we can use as a feature-feature correspondence. There may be some multiple features assigned to the same centroid. Then in this case, we have to pick one, or we can just make many correspondences. It's just a matter of your choice. But essentially, those feature-to-features correspondences can be used the following ransacking or spatial verification. So this is quite useful. So next, on the other hand, the blood performs quite well, even with a small vocabulary. Actually, this is important because we have to assign the features to the centroid. If the vocabulary is large, it takes some time. Of course, we can use ANN and so on, but still smaller is better. But even with small vocabulary, blood works quite well, as good as large vocabulary backward words. And it is known that blood can be further compressed by PCA with negligible loss of the performance. Okay, and another good point of the blood is it does not increase the memory footprint even if you use many features. But in other words, it is not a good idea to use many features to represent in a bag of words, because then bag of words will be very dense histogram, and so you cannot be efficiently compute with the inverted indexing. So this motivates us to use many features for the blood. For example, instead of using local key point detection like DOG, we can simply use dense shift, which is a shift descriptors densely detected on a regular grid. When we use dense features, we lose a viewpoint invariance somehow. But for the place recognition task, which is actually okay, because what we want is we want the image from the same view. So we don't need an invariance of the viewpoint changes so much. And this, in fact, this dense-based representation naturally leads to the recent CNN-based representation, because like NetBlood, because we can regard the convolutional radius as a densely described feature. So it is quite natural to extend to the CNN-based representation. So now I'm going to explain about how to extend these standard techniques to the place recognition. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to take some. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. So I would like to talk about how to customize or tailor the standard techniques to the place recognition program. So now I'd like to review a bit about bag of words representation here. So please forget about the blood for 5–10 minutes. So in general, there are quite a lot of techniques to boost up the performance of bag of words image retrieval. We should, of course, adapt such techniques which are suitable for, if it is suitable for the place recognition. And if that can address these problems by the large changes in appearance. So the first problem is in the modern city, there are many repetitive structures, as you can see here. This makes a serious problem for bag of words matching, because the features detected on such patterns saturate the histogram and dominate the similarity scoring. So there are no methods called burstness weighting that simply suppress the overweighted histogram. This is very effective actually in the place recognition task. Another technique is soft or multiple assignment. As we are using quantized feature space, the assignment will be erroneous close to the boundary of the feature these clusters. In other words, assignment is unreliable if the feature is far from the cluster centroid. So this can be solved by multiple assignment. In the multiple assignment, the feature is simply assigned to not only the first nearest neighbor, but for the second, third nearest neighbors. And optionally, you can compute the distance to the centroid and use it as the weights of the visual world counting. So on top of these state-of-the-arts, we developed a fusion of these techniques. We call it adaptive assignment. In this method, we first detect repetitive patterns in the image explicitly and group them like this. So this can be done using visual world clustering and using spatial position, looking at the spatial position of the features on the image. Then we deem it as an important and distinctive feature if it belongs to the small clusters. So if it does not belong to the repeated patterns. Then for such things, we do the multiple assignment. So but for the features grouped to the repetitive patterns, we don't do any multiple assignment because it will again increase the pause in the histogram. So this is in the end simple technique, but it works quite well for this street level place recognition task. So yes, okay. There is another nice technique which is called Hamming embedding, but probably I will skip this because I'm running out of time. So, but basically the idea is this method subdivides each Voronoi cell into a lower dimensional subspace and give additional signature, which is binary. So this can measure the distances between the visual world matches more precisely, but it doesn't require too many memory space because it's just binary signatures. So this is another extension. And there is a method called dislocations, which is an extended version of this Hamming embedding, but I will skip this for the time. So if there is any questions so far? Okay, so the approaches I have introduced so far are sort of modification of the general image representations. But the database images are geotagged. We can use that information to improve the place recognition performances. So then how we can adapt such geographic information in this task? The key idea is that spatially far images should not match. So this is simple, but it's a good idea, I think. So for example, the image here, so if you extract some features on the image here, the feature should not match from elsewhere if it is distant. So this idea has been used in earlier works, and based on this idea, we can do many things. For example, we can detect confusing features on the image, such as trees or repeated patterns as well. So in this method, they explicitly do the feature matching between the image and the image samples from the distance location. And then find the areas which has high density of the local matches. Then we can compute the confusion scores for every region and make a kind of mask. So I don't know if the contextual weighting presented on Monday is inspired by this method, but I think there are some relations to the recent modern CNN-based masking or finding confusing places, and these classic approaches. So the same idea was used in different approaches, such as learning per place linear SVM, or also we can use for making the positive and negative examples for training CNN image descriptors like NetBlood. So the conclusion here is that it would be particularly interesting to use these location players if you want to develop some new place recognition techniques. Okay, so next I want to discuss about how we can deal with major changes in appearance. For example, images include large illumination changes like day, night, or seasonal changes. So these problems across the time and seasons are also often studied in the robot vision communities. For example, Modern generates illumination invariant images by converting RGB images to the kind of illumination free image using the sensor information. Newbert uses repeated recording of the sequence of images across the seasons. Assuming that the images across the different seasons are aligned, they can learn the transition of the visual world across the seasons. So then, for example, given the query images of the summertime, they can transfer the visual world to the winter version and search for the winter database. We also try to address the day-night illumination changes. To do that, we first generated a very challenging data set that contains major changes in illumination as well as structural changes. The main observation by studying with this data set is that dense shift can cope with large changes in appearance and illumination. So that means the descriptors are quite strong enough for the illumination changes. But this local key point detection is quite weak to the illumination changes. So we tried a simple experiments that is, so left is a query image, right is a street view image. We run the standard feature matching with ransacking. And this shows the, and we evaluate the number of in-layer matches that can indicate the difficulty or easiness of the image retrieval. Because if the in-layer rate is high, we can easily retrieve the images because that's a trick. So for the, if we use the sparse features, it's very difficult. The in-layer ratio is quite low like this. But once we switch to the dense shift, actually the problem becomes much easier. Then if we synthesize the image and generate the view close to the query image, then the problem will be a bit easier even for the sparse features. So if we combine them, synthesizing the viewpoint and using a dense features, the problem will be much easier. So from these observations, we decided to explicitly generate the synthesized views and add them on the database images. So originally we have these street view images on the red dots, but we generate synthesized images on the gray dot positions. To do that, we use the depth map associated to the panoramic images of the street view. Actually, you can get the depth map as well from the street view. Then we generate this kind of synthesized images. So we did quite naive synthesis. So there are many holes and the quality is not that great. But this is already sufficient for the place recognition task. Okay. So this is the result. The left column is the query images, and the second one is the one retrieved from the synthesized images. So as you can see, there are less viewpoint changes between them, and we can match well, quite well. But if we use only the original images, those images are matched, which is wrong. And these are another examples. So as you see, the quality is not that bad, but if we encode to the blood and dense shift and blood descriptor, it works quite well. So as the last topic of this session, I'd like to introduce the datasets available for the benchmarks and the standard evaluation protocol. But okay, yes. Okay, so yes, okay, I don't remember the number exactly, but I think I expand the database like 10 times. So the database becomes very large. But as we are using the blood compression, so the increase is quite fine. And also, if you can use product quantization, there we can also suppress the memory footprint. Okay. Okay. So as the last topic of this session, I'd like to introduce some datasets available for the benchmarks and standard evaluation protocols. So there are quite a lot of benchmark dataset, and as I just explained, we prepared this Tokyo dataset, which is quite challenging, and the size is not very large, but the query images has these illumination changes. And I just show the standard Oxford Paris because it's also the dataset with a building. And there are datasets for the 3D based approaches. Actually, for the 3D based approaches, there are quite a lot of them, including the San Francisco and the others. And there were new dataset presented the day before yesterday, I think. There were some new Baidu dataset, and so on. Okay, so if you want to evaluate your method, I would recommend to use, of course, our Tokyo dataset and also the largest San Francisco dataset. And the good thing of the San Francisco dataset is there is some 3D reconstruction too. So you can compare with the 2D and 3D method. So actually, for evaluating your method in the place recognition, it is reasonable to evaluate the recall for evaluating your performance. But the evaluation protocol differs by the ground truth. So I thought I prepared it, but I don't think. Okay. So the San Francisco dataset gives the labels of the images as a ground truth data. So each database image has building ID and query has several IDs. So if you do the image retrieval and if the ID match, we can deem as a correct match. So this is the way of evaluation. And you can computer recall with respect to if your retrieval succeeded or not, and draw some graphs. And for other data set, which has the GPS position as a ground truth, we can just threshold it and we can use them as a label if it's correctly localized or not. But if you want to compare with the 3D method, I think it is more fair to evaluate only top one image, top one retrieved, and evaluate with the positions. So the graph of the x-axis will be the distance threshold like this, and y-axis will be the rate of correctly localized images. So I was roughly speaking about 2D, 3D methods. But probably the question is, which is better, 2D or 3D? So I have no clear answer yet, but there are some advantages and disadvantages. For the 2D method, the database is simple. It's just images and GPS. But for the 3D method, we have to prepare the large structure for motion, and we save all the point clouds. And if a new image comes, we have to really rerun the boundary adjustment again. But if we evaluate it, it seems 3D method is more accurate. But actually, we presented a paper, poster yesterday. Before that, there was no fair comparison between the 2D and 3D method. Because as I briefly mentioned, the San Francisco dataset has a 3D point cloud and images, so we can compare it. But they provide only the labels, and there are no ground truth camera poses. So in this work, we manually make the feature labeling and compute the ground truth camera pose for the query images. Now we can fairly evaluate 2D versus 3D method. So this is the result of the evaluation, actually. And these two graphs are the 2D methods. And please see these curves, bottom two curves. Those are the kind of 2D methods, state of the art. So this log is Hamming embedding based, back-of-words based. And these are the blood-based approaches. So actually, all of them has quite similar performances. But if we compare with the 3D based method, and if we want to have a accurate localization, 3D method is better. So one of the 3D methods is this green curve. So actually, in the 3D method, the localization rate is like 60% for the 5-meter distance threshold. But for the 2D based method, it's much worse. This is quite obvious because the accuracy of the 2D method is quite depending on the sampling rate of the database. So if you want to make it more accurate, this is what we recommend. You can retrieve some images from the database and do the local SFM online. And then you can have the more better poses, accurate better poses in 3D space and register it back to the map. With this method, with this technique, we can improve the 2D based method quite a lot. Of course, there is a trade-off of the computational time. We have to compute the SFM online. But I think this method could be potentially used for the future pipelines, because then we don't have to really maintain the large global 3D models. So to summarize, so I think there are still some interesting things, even for the feature-based place recognition. And what we still have to think about is, one of the topic is image projection models. In the earlier of this session, I said we just make a cutout of the perspective images from panorama, but of course, this does not really cover the whole nice characteristics of the panoramic view. So there could be better representation of the image or better representation of the image descriptors. So I'm quite interested in this direction. And of course, there should be some better CNN-based approach, or maybe the fusion of the feature and the CNN-based. And now I'm currently interested in large-scale indoor localization, which is not really done yet. I guess there are some, of course, there are many indoor localization, but often it's not really in the large scale. It's typically not too large. And also there will be some, there could be some nice techniques by combining with semantic informations. So that's all from my side. And if there is any questions, yes, please. Oh, so NN means just a standard image retrieval, and SR is with a spatial verification. So we take top 20 images and re-rank it, or maybe top 100. And SR SFM is with the local SFM. Yes, ransack and re-ranking.
Hi. Do you have any papers available, and where could we get them, or code?
So papers?
Papers or code available?
Oh, actually, so here, all the methods, for all the methods, codes are available. So you can use this log, netblad, and so on. It's all available. Sorry? So we have the paper about this. Oh yeah, we will put the links to the code on our this tutorial page. Is it okay?
So I just have a quick comment. If we would appreciate if someone asks a question without the microphone, if you can repeat the question so that we can hear what the question was. Is that clear or not? So if someone asks a question from the audience without the microphone, I would appreciate if you can repeat the question so that we can hear the question.
Okay.
And I actually have a question. So when it comes to unstructured large data sets like the ones you get from, I don't know, Flickr or some internet database, there could be the case where you would have redundant images. So a lot of images taken from the same perspective, same scale, same time, which does not add a lot of information. So how would do you have a method to like prune that to just a set of essential images? Because if you keep a really large database of images, that's not easy to handle. So if you can prune it down to just the essential set of images, that's much better.
So for the organized images, of course, we have to somehow first organize them. And one of the way may be using a structure for motion. And in the structure for motion, there are many ways to find some landmark images when there are too many things. So I think that will be one option, or we can just simply pre-cluster them. Or that's.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and So I will conclude my talk now. Thank you very much. Do you want to use mine?